And the wonderful thing is when you have a conversation with somebody about, their personal development, what they need, to kind of continue being sustainable and to ensure that they're relevant, and they also acknowledge it because they didn't see it for themselves, that's when you've hit the nail on the head. And it was such a shift because before, again, we've got programs that are, on offer, but it's not solving for the skills that we need. So we're very good at training, and pushing down a whole lot of training activity. But are we equipping people with the skills that they need because we recognize that this is what the business will require?
Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of the HR 360 podcast. My name is Themba. We bring to you insights from HR professionals, HR leaders, people who have done it and got the shirt for it. This message is about HR, the transformation, latest trends, technology developments. This message will go as far as Timbuktu. We're taking this message really from Cape to Cairo to our partners in Botswana, Eswatini, Zambia, Ghana, Rwanda, Malawi, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. We're bringing to you an exciting, conversation with a special guest, Palesa, the exec human capital at Old Mutual Insure.
That's right.
Greetings.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much. The fact that you've made time to come through, we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I can imagine we're at a time where all of us really have got 1,000 balls that we're juggling in the air at the same time. So for you to really say, this ball can wait, let me grab the HR 360 ball for now, that means a lot to us.
No, I believe in using, any platform and opportunity, Themba, to just, contribute, into the conversation at a bigger level, with hopefully with scale, and just to, contribute to the ideas of things that are evolving in our fraternity.
100%, 100%. I stay away from introducing people because I don't want to limit you, right? I want you to introduce yourself the best way you know how. At what age you started crawling, what age you started speaking, all those type of things. So maybe you can look straight into the audience and tell us about, yourself, what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, so my name is Palesa Ntoagae, the oldest of 3 daughters. Both parents are late. I had a very, cocooned upbringing in the East Rand in Springs. People from Guatemala will know what I mean. And went to an all-girls school. And, the first time I actually left the province was to go to university. That's how cocooned and shelled I was. And studied, a Bachelor of Commerce at Rhodes University, certainly discovered who I was as a young woman at that point in time, and eventually left and ventured out, into the wonderful world of work, after, some attempts to get into the job market. I have a 17-year-old son. His name is Jabari. All parents, once you have a child, it's really like having your heart, walk outside of your body. And he really is by far the biggest assignment I think, God has tasked me with. I love cycling. In fact, I consider myself a cycling empress.
Oh, nice.
Not at elite, level from a fitness perspective, but I certainly do it for fitness, for health, and to challenge myself. Love traveling. And, just spending quality time, with family, friends is something that really, that gives me meaning at a personal level, and continuously just learning, about what's happening in HR and the world of work. I'm very purposeful about giving back, and I really have conned, this notion of ensuring that I leave people feeling hopeful, in all my dealings and interactions with them. And I think that's pretty much sums it up. That's how I'd like people to remember me in this moment.
Okay. Okay, that's a beautiful one. Thank you so much for that intro. You see, I wouldn't have said all those things, I would have limited. I would just said, this is Palesa from Old Mutual Insure. Thank you, goodbye.
True.
So that's why I refrain from introducing people. I allow you to take the stage and shine. I want us to kind of lay, a nice foundation for this discussion. We are, talking today. We're in a discussion really where we delve into the role of HR, in creating a future fit organization, right? The businesses of the future, all those type of things. What will it take? The type of thinking, the type of leadership, the resources, the approach, and the likes.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just break the ice, and kind of get your perspective around where you think we are. So if you use one word to describe today's business landscape, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a really deep and big question. Short but deep. Themba, the word impermanence comes to mind.
Okay.
Because we are marred by constant change and evolution. Things are no longer permanent and predictable. We've had to, develop a muscle of being able to deal with uncertainty and, learn to connect dots between things that at face value don't seem to be connected, but actually maybe. So impermanence for me is, kind of, if you have, imagine a word cloud, that's the word that just kind of comes to mind. I don't like the use of, words like flux because they've got a different, inference. But I think impermanence is really around reminding ourselves that things are not as they were and they're not going to be as they are today.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a constant evolution at play. And that's the business context, that we're dealing with. Depending on whether there's a black swan event that's accelerated some change or adoption of different technology or processes, the change happens quickly or slowly, but the change is the constant ever evolving,
100%,
norm.
100%.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting, thing, perspective, really, Palesa. Like, you talk about change. How do you feel about change as a HR professional?
Change can be overwhelming.
Okay.
And we are dealing with, so many issues at any point in time.
Yes.
And, as human beings, we like predictability, we like stability, but we're not in a position to be able to hang on to that, And so one of the things that I think we're grappling with as a fraternity is how do we actually just infuse this ability for people to be able to constantly embrace shift, constantly rewire. Because when you infuse that in, the way you work or in your day-to-day life, that's when things change, you're not as rattled and you're able to kind of respond very quickly, and kind of settle, as opposed to, kind of being in freeze mode because you're trying to deal with the shock of experiencing something that you never expected would happen. So this notion of just increasing our, ability to respond to change, embrace it, and then continue, is important and not be paralyzed, by shocks to the system is key. I had an interesting conversation, Themba, with my team on an article I read about if you want to infuse, your ability to just, be able to respond to things that are different. It's as small as if you used to brushing your teeth with your right hand, use your left hand every now and then, And it sounds small, but it is about getting out of this routine and mode of, doing things the same way all the time.
That's a very interesting
because one. If you know what I mean? If you don't, kind of put it into your day-to-day routine, when it happens in a bigger organizational context, you know what I mean? It just gets harder for you to respond to that. So there's different ways at a micro level, seemingly myopic level, but this ability to shock yourself from time to time is something that I think, we are grasping with And how do we make sure that we help our employees, to also be able to just embrace, so that the shocks don't paralyze them, yeah.
That's a very good point. I must try that, right? Because I'm a right-handed person, and I
Yes.
always brush my teeth with this hand. I'm gonna start trying, because, like, I think, like you say, it's something that you now have to think about, or you have to be, present, type of a thing. Because if you're used to something, sometimes you're not even present. You're just doing it because you're so used to it.
That's it.
Right? But the minute you're trying something new,
Yep.
then you have to apply yourself, you have to be present, you have to pay attention, all those type of things. Let's talk about change in the HR fraternity. What are you seeing as being like a major, difference between where things were 5 years ago and where things are today?
So the most obvious one is, I think, the crisis that came with the pandemic certainly elevated the role we have in ensuring that the organization responds well, and in a meaningful way to employees, right? So mental health, well-being really are now a top priority for most organizations.
Okay, well-being.
And because people are no longer seen as just, doers, right? People are seen as whole human beings who have a full life outside of work. If there are challenges, they actually manifest at work, and they can get in the way of productivity, right, and reaching outcomes. But I think what's also happening, Themba, is there's a bigger responsibility for us to actually help our leaders think differently about the business, because a lot of companies are trying to get back to, pre-COVID profitability levels. Some companies didn't make it, others are still struggling. And so our role to actually redesign our businesses for relevance have become even more, important. And that's the thinking partner space that I think we occupy, at this point in time. And, the other piece for me is we've got this whole discussion around how do we unlock the value of technological advances, things like, AI, automation, thinking through what's the best way to get a task done. Is it through a human being, a bot, or both? And that for me is really powerful, because it means the conversation around, using technological advances no longer sits with IT.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah.
It must be done with human capital around the table. Because if we're not clear about what friction are we trying to remove in the work or in the process, as the experts in designing jobs, then what IT does is they go and design something, but it's not necessarily solving, for the organizational challenge that we kind of are aware of. And so that, for me, I think are the two, aspects that I think we have an opportunity to influence, lean in, and partner with our business leaders. And that's the change, and the big difference. A few years ago, in my, human capital kind of role, I had different challenges. It was the usual solving for DEIB issues, solving for ensuring that the HR initiatives, will have an impact on the business strategy. But the world was much more settled and predictable,
Okay.
And now that's no longer the case. We've been displaced in a lot of ways by what's happened, from 2020. And so we've been forced to think about how do we shift in case another shock like a COVID happens,
Yes.
And what have we learned that we actually can divorce and leave behind? And how do we then continue to reorganize ourselves so that we get back to the profitability levels that we had, before 2020. I think that's where we have an opportunity to just, show up.
So what type of questions, like, are you asking, yourselves, as an HR function?
Yeah.
You being an HR leader with a team, what type of questions are you constantly asking your team, so that you don't get left behind?
Yeah. So the conversation around where we unlock value streamline with the use of technology to just make sure that work is more meaningful, for employees. And we just manage down, the cost of operations, where a task can be better fulfilled by some sort of bot. The questions for us there is, how are our HR policies and processes actually helping with the transformation?
Okay.
Because what often happens is we talk about AI, but it's as if we're watching a movie. We're pointing, and I'm saying, how have we re-engineered our assessments tools, Themba, to really assess those traits and competencies that are important if this role is no longer the same? I find there are certain processes we have that are still static, and yet there's an acknowledgement that jobs have changed. Yeah. So how are we changing that? How are we changing our assessment boundaries? If I think about culture, we have to shift what we value. And so for real transformation to happen and to be sustainable, infusing agility, innovation in work, in our values, in what we value, in what we recognize, what we celebrate is important. But how have we made that systematic in our organization, whether it be through the recognition programs that we have? If we appreciate that certain work can only be done with teams, how have we redesigned our recognition programs to recognize, for team contributions? And so those are some of the conversations that we're having, that actually some of the mechanisms we have not shifted, and yet we're saying we value, different behaviors. We value, the delivery through, multidisciplinary teams.
Yeah.
But when you look at the recognition, the remuneration, all of that are still very much individualistic. And so those are some of the questions we're having about how does this support that cultural, that behavioral shift that we want to drive? Because if we don't change, the mechanisms we have, you're not going to see it, in the behavior of how people show up in that organization.
100%. I want us to talk about the role of data.
Yes.
In achieving everything you've just, explained right now. How are you guys leveraging on data? Possibly one or two use cases on how, you've solved one or two business challenges?
So, we are no different to many organizations where you've got this tech stack of different systems, and you don't have you don't press one button and literally a beautiful dashboard of various insights into people spewed out. So we have to do a lot of mining and consolidating information. The benefit I have is we've got some smart people in the business. I mean, some of our data scientists and actuaries are really just the best in the business. And so we've partnered with some of them just to help us inform certain response plans. And I'll give you a very simple and potentially a little sophisticated example.
Okay.
At the beginning of, I think, 2022, moving to 2023, we had this wonderful offering of wellness initiatives, Themba. It almost felt like a menu in a restaurant, Come work for us, we provide holistic wellness, pick from the menu, what you want to opt into. But when we started merging all the different data sets from our healthcare providers, things like behavioral patterns, because we do monitor foot flow to the office, how are people spending their times, you've got interesting intel from Microsoft Viva that'll tell you, what is the social connections that are happening in the workplace. Overlay that with some of the kind of people challenges that were coming through from our culture, engagement kind of tool that we use to just measure, how engagement levels are in the organization. It started telling us a very different story. And what was very clear is the initiatives we have actually are not solving for the what people need, from whether it be financial, well-being. Mental health is an issue, I think, across the board. And so it forced us to have very honest conversations about things that we're going to stop doing, because actually it's a nice to have on
You're not
paper.
solving the right.
This is it. We're not solving for what our people actually need, and using the data to actually create more meaningful, initiatives that are targeted at the challenges that people are solving for. This notion of a health passport is really not as difficult as it sounds, because the data sets are there. All companies have information that tells you, cyclical sick patterns of people. You've got medical aid information that tells you, I have a dependent, it's a son. Is there something happening there? How is my, kind of sick leave or annual patterns kind of, aligning with my productivity levels, at work in some instances. And so it really was about, how do we pull that information together in such a way that it tells a story, but most importantly informs our well-being response plan.
Yes.
And if I look at what we do now versus, earlier last year, it's different. Some of the decisions we made to stop certain activities scared people, but it was the right call because it wasn't solving for the challenges that our people were going under. And then a more sophisticated one, for me is when we look at our talent development, programs, because L&D is also another big space where there's a lot of information, rich information.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to step back and have a frank conversation about what are some of the leadership capabilities we need as we evolve as a business. When we look at our succession candidates, their collective experience and skills, what does that look like? And what's missing? What are we actually missing? Because it's so easy to get carried away and tick the box of, we've had a talent conversation, we know who our successors are, but what is missing in the skills pool of these individuals that we need actually in how the business is evolving? And when we overlaid all of that information, the opportunity to solve for certain skills became so much more evident. And so whatever programs we've got in place were then designed to actually emphasize, those experiences, those critical experiences that are missing. And the wonderful thing is, when you have a conversation with somebody about, their personal development, what they need, to kind of continue being sustainable, and to ensure that they're relevant, and they also acknowledge it because they didn't see it for themselves, that's when you've hit the nail on the head. And it was such a shift, because before, again, we've got programs that are, on offer, but it's not solving for the skills that we need. So we're very good at training, and pushing down a whole lot of training activity. But are we equipping people with the skills that they need, because we recognize that this is what the business will require? And that, for me, is something that was a bit more sophisticated, about how do we merge all of this information, because people have skill set, but if you're not studying, analyzing, what does this mean for the leadership pool that we're building? Are we actually addressing the gaps that the business needs, the real leadership capabilities? Then you are just going to take people through training, but you're not
100%.
necessarily going to prepare them, for the role requirements.
So on a scale of, I love everything you've just said now. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, 10 being the best, excellent,
Yes.
type of a place to be. How well would you say you're leveraging data in your HR function to be more data driven? And if you're not at 10 currently, what will get you to a 10?
So I'm gonna sound a little bit conservative. I would say 5 to 6 out of 10.
5 to 6 out of 10.
Because the notion of, recreating HR data as big data for ourselves is something that we've embraced, very recently. To improve on that rating, Themba, it does require our systems to have a little bit more integration. And for that, we know who are the business partners we need to work with. And and I think, to get to a stage where we're no longer using lagging data points, but we're able to actually give the business more lead indicators.
Okay.
And that, for me, is what will actually improve, the rating, from my experience. It takes time. It requires you to do it, over and above your kind of daily job jar, so to speak. And, it's possible. It's possible. But we do have, an environment where there's different legacy systems, certain, systems don't speak to each other. And I think that's where, for me, there's a time that needs to be invested, both in the form of just investment in slick, technology, but also anything that could help bring all of that information together. So those are I think the things that'll move the delta for us.
Thanks, Palesa. I should have asked you this question a little bit earlier. I'm really, really, really curious to to find out from you when did data, as an HR leader, when did it start making sense to you? I'm asking this question because we deal with a lot of HR leaders,
yes,
and I mean across Africa, but it seems as if it's still a foreign concept. Yes, we know about it. We've heard about that. We'll look at it. It's not something that we can or we cannot live without. Type of a thing. So when did it start making sense to you to say, I understand it's important. Not only do I understand, but I understand that we must make the investment today to solve some, if not most, of our business problems. So like, what got you into that mode to say, yes, we're gonna start making the investment today?
I think when you are hit with surprises, that's when you probably kind of reframe your mindset, and in a previous role, Themba, it was fascinating. What had happened was we had spent a lot of money developing women, had a very proud story to tell, and we could demonstrate the money that we spend, experiences that we've pushed down, the number of people who've gone through the program. And then one day, the newly kind of chief executive just asked a very simple but powerful question.
Okay.
And she just said to me, it all sounds great, but how come we still have only male chief executives, in the business? So if this is what we've done with all this beautiful, investment and money that we had, and the programs that are in place, why is that not translating into the real business impact? And that, for me, is probably that moment of sanity where I was like, if there's no correlation between what we're doing and the impact that we're looking for, then we are clearly not interpreting, the information properly, or we are missing certain data points that could help us inform how do we do things differently. And out of that discussion, because the information was there, but in a sense, it wasn't necessarily resulting in the business outcome that was required at that time. And that forced us to then say, okay, let's go back, take a step back. How about we go have conversations with, the participants, the alumni of the program. Let's understand what happened between the experience you had versus where you are now. Why is there kind of a stagnation, that's happening? Let's have a conversation with other people that are actually important, to enable this, to kind of work. And only when we started kind of overlaying all of that information together, because it's different data sources from different stakeholders, Themba, we then understood what was missing, in how we responded to the issue of gender representation in the organization, because ultimately that's what we were trying to solve for, know? And I think, that for me, this notion of, how do you mesh and my son calls it mesh up. Now you can see I live with a teenager. How do you mesh up or marry different data points or data sets to improve on what you're doing so you have the right outcome. You understand? That is when, for me, I really reflected on it's important to understand, the different perspectives and elements so that you're able to actually have a plan that is effective, And the example sounds very simple, but it's not as simple, as it was. I mean, some of the reflections we had was, understanding what are the barriers, what can we learn from the feedback, that these people are giving us. Some of our chief executives who've actually made it, what do they have to tell us? What is a blueprint of success? What are the critical experiences? And when we, married all of that information, we realized actually, but there's a whole lot of critical experiences that we have not designed into this because we have not included feedback from the people who've been in that role,
Yes,
they may
yes.
look different, they're not women, but that's good. We need to hear from them, on what the critical success factors are. So it sounds simple, but, when I think about 7-8 years ago, that's where we landed on incorporating, those different points so that you actually get the right insights to design the right interventions, in place.
Okay. A couple of years back, I've read a book by Dr. Carroll. I remember it was titled Growth Mindset, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, we've learned so much from that book on how to approach situations. But I mean, it sounds to me like what you've just described and explained now has so much to do with like that growth mindset. And I'm just wondering, like, what got you guys there? What got you to that level of thinking like that?
It's the disconnect between what we're doing and the outcome we need to see. And so if you're not paying attention...
If you're not paying attention.
Yeah, if you're not paying attention, you can have a wonderful, list, call it a brag book of initiatives you're doing. But what impact are those initiatives having?
Okay.
So if you're not connecting those two, for me, you're always going to miss,
Initiative versus impact.
This is it. That link.
So you've got to pay attention to that. That's a very good point.
The link needs to be so clear and so tight. It must be, easily translatable or seen by anybody else who's not close to whatever the business challenge is, and not being afraid to just let go of things that are no longer working. Themba. There's a lot of, I think, sometimes ego gets in the way where people just don't want to let go of something that used to work before.
Wow,
you know
that's
what I
a very
mean?
good point.
So that openness linked to the growth mindset, for me, it's the same thing. If what you're doing is not giving you the outcome that you want, you have to pause and reflect and redesign, and get a different opinion. Allow yourself to be challenged, and invite other people who maybe see the problem statement different to you so that you're able to come up with a different solution, or a response plan. That's important. And I think a lot of people miss that opportunity,
Yeah. Based on what you're saying, right? I'm getting more and more and more and more interested in learning from you, like the description of a modern HR leader. How would you describe, like, what are the characteristics, what are the skills, what are the, all those type of things? I know you've said a lot about, leadership and mindset and all those type of things, but if you were to describe the modern, HR leader, how would you describe them?
It's having this ability to, connect patterns that are happening outside of our organization with, what does this mean for us in the organization? Because a lot of the indicators, actually, we see them, externally, Themba. It's really, spending a lot of time with, people that are different to you. So this notion of having a really diverse network, of people that you deal with, is important for me.
Okay.
And I often use this example very loosely, but there are always indicators around us that tell us what needs to shift in how we look at the business and maybe certain capabilities that are missing. My son is a 17-year-old who lives in a different world. He plays in the metaverse, he does, because he's got friends who are, connecting with him in a system from all over the world. So his global outview on life is very different. He tells me before I read the news what happened in the States, what happened in, I don't know, China, because he's got friends there, right?
Yes,
that he meets with online regularly.
Yes.
My global network, I have to actually pick up the phone or set up an email. So there's a time lag between how the speed of information
not
moves.
in real time, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's embraced technology because he's grown up in it. I've had to learn to use technology, adapt to it. And his view on work is so different. And so as an human capital practitioner, if you're not seeing that these are the people that are going to enter the workspace a few years from now, and what are the things, that we need to shift or think differently about, then we are already missing that opportunity. So it's seeing the signs, and the signs are everywhere. It's with people that are younger than us, people that are different to us. It's what are the patterns of our customers? What are we seeing? What are their preferences? Because they are the ones that are actually making us redesign our business. It's not us dictating or telling anymore. It is about what these young people who come into the work want. They're not apologetic about their demands.
No, 100%.
You know what I mean?
And they shouldn't be, right?
No, they shouldn't be.
Yes.
They shouldn't be. So if we're not attuned to that, and we're wearing this governance, keep things the same, all about adherence to compliance, etc., I think we're missing the opportunity to be that change agent. And I think, it's a long way of describing that change agent that we need to possess, but we need to be in tune with what am I seeing, what does it mean for work, what does it mean for how jobs are designed, what does it mean for the type of leaders that are going to come into the organization, and how do we start thinking differently about re-engineering some of our processes so that our environment is ready to receive, embrace, and actually accept, people who generationally are operating very differently, to the gray hairs that are in the organization.
Yeah. It sounds to me, though, that like you guys have got everything figured out. What's your problem?
No, that's not. Yeah, I don't want to create that impression at all.
Like, what's keeping you up at night? If you're waking up at the wee hours,
yeah,
what's going on? What are you thinking about?
So, what keeps me up at night is we have an opportunity to redesign our organizations, but we also have real socio-economic challenges, Themba. And one of the discussions we have, usually at our social and ethics committee is, gosh, we're doing so much. Should we be doing this really? Is this, our responsibility as a corporate citizen? And the reality is there's more that's expected from us in this day and age. Our Gini coefficient is ridiculous. It's so high. It reflects the income disparity, in SA. We have a real challenge of unemployment. And my concern is, how do we make sure that we use whatever technological advances to redesign work so that we actually are able to absorb people into the economy? Because we are not going to thrive alone in a bubble, as Old Mutual ensure. You know what I mean? So leaning into societal issues has become a way of being for us. We've had to. Because the same communities and societies is our client and talent pool, ultimately,
Yeah.
Making sure that the reskilling agenda extends externally has become something that we've had to do over time. So over and above focusing on our own employees, we're saying, what skills can we equip, unemployed youth with? Even if we can't absorb now, but let's get into giving them some skills so that they're able to compete for work elsewhere. Because that, people talk about this African demographic dividend. That's what it is. Africa will have, the largest workforce globally. And if we're not giving our people the skills to be able to plug into different economies anyway, all it does is it adds pressure onto the welfare, challenges
100%,
here.
100%.
So those are things that worry me. And as corporate citizens, we have to play into that space. We cannot sit and be armchair critics and point fingers at the government. And so as a human capital expert, solving for skills is all about internal and external, employees. How are we looking at those talent pools differently? Because we can't afford to leave anyone behind, And those are the things that really keep me up at night.
100%.
We've seen, how if I think about Chicka 60-60, it really took people who would otherwise be on the street corners begging, and with a simple use of tech, it has given a whole lot more people with basic skills just the ability to enter the job market and derive an income, to feed their families. That for me is the real responsibilities that leaders at all levels actually have. How do we use that to just ensure that the displacement of jobs, is reduced, that gap, is being reduced, just leveraging off the power of technology. It really is about that.
Okay. Palesa, I'm going to put this plane down very soon. Let's prepare for landing, okay? I just want you to share with us two more things. Then we're on the ground. Top 3 priorities for the next 3 to 5 years for you guys?
So we are trying to whittle down because the list, gets very long, and you've got kind of different stakeholder expectations.
Okay.
The big one for us, because we are in the non-life industry, Themba, it's very obvious. Generative AI is not just another iPhone moment. It's here. It started changing our business model. We have a couple of hacks underway in the business, and depending on the function, there's certain tasks that we're comfortable, put a bot there, let a person do something else. So our priority is really redesigning our business model. That's a really big one for us, because we want to give people different type of work that appeals to cognitive abilities as opposed to just simple tasks, because that a system can do. That's a big one, and it infers a change to some of our organizational values. I think I alluded to this earlier. We're having discussions about, does it still make sense? Is this something that we should value still?
Yeah.
How does it help infuse that agility in the system, and the type of employees that we need? The second one is continuing to, keep a handle on our employees. Overall, we've got a very strong well-being proposition at OMI. And we really want to continue enhancing that with things that are meaningful for employees. But we're also saying, how do we recognize the fact that, people have had to do more to be able to cope? And so embracing, people, if they've got their side hustles, how do we support them as an organization? Because, the context that we're living in says that, people have had to, either have more than one role or, embrace the gig economy. And that's something that 6 years ago, we would not have been open to. You know what I mean? It's not something that we would have considered, because the mindset at the time would be, you're stealing my company time to do other things. But actually, it's complementary. If people aren't competing with the core organization and it's another means of income, how do we help them, to just empower themselves financially? And so, holistically, from a well-being perspective, it's financing, it's physical health, it's mental health. We continue to think about what else should we be doing, that's responsible and sustainable. And then lastly, we are, discussing what does it mean for our leaders and how they show up.
Okay.
It's been a long-running conversation. And I don't think we will settle on it, very quickly, because there's a lot of implications for it. If you don't have, kind of the right thinking mindset behaviors at the top, it's very difficult to translate it further down in the organization. So given this big change, we need to, kind of continue on as an organization in our business model, making sure we arrest, the engagement, social, mental health, and things don't deteriorate for staff. How do we make sure that the leaders are the right ones with the right value systems that we want, so that they are actually able to lead, and we derive scale, from how people experience leaders in the business. That for me is where we can differentiate. It's any transformation has to be sustained by the conversations that the leaders are having, and what they're doing to drive and propel people to see the vision.
Okay.
We are in such a different world where you almost have to get people to reimagine, think differently, and believe your story.
Okay.
And if you're not able to compel and convince people to follow you, in that direction where there's a lot of uncertainty, you've already missed the opportunity to lead the transformation.
100%.
So bolstering that leadership muscle for us, is something that is really important, on our agenda.
Okay. Then I also wanted to ask you, like, which countries do you look up to, as far as HR transformation is concerned?
It's tricky, right? I think by virtue of what's happened, we've had to look at other industries, and, some of them are sitting in other kind of geographical positions that, are far from us. But the world has also become, much, much smaller.
True.
And I quite appreciate, the advances made, in Europe, just some of the thinking around, the policies. I think I was discussing with a colleague the other day, I just can't recall if it's France or what, but, countries where they've actually taken a hard stance at saying this is not okay as an organization. We don't promote, people imposing on other people's personal time, after work. And how do we put guardrails in place? Either the system shuts down at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and guess what? If you really want to get hold of Themba, you'll have to wait until tomorrow. Like that for me, I thought, gosh, that's different, because we talk about how do we maintain wellness for people, but we don't make hard-coded rules, to support some of the decisions that we made. And in other instances, it's companies that actually see people as whole human beings. We've got some local companies that are doing amazing things in SA, but I think there's far more advancement internationally where, I come in and I give 5 hours of my time, and that's okay. So the employment contract, Themba, is not designed around a permanent working arrangement,
Okay.
And there's an acceptance that tomorrow I'm actually providing a similar service to another organization. I think we still have some way to go in formalizing that. A lot of what we have is, if you look at the pension fund rules, some of the benefits that we have is designed around a certain contract, that we are saying is shifting and changing, but we haven't made those decisions, We've got people that are living longer, in certain markets. Certainly there's a way that people who, have reached kind of that retirement age are able to be repurposed into other career fields. I'm not sure we formalize that, necessarily here, so that we create the opportunity to bring in young people, but also be able to sustainably say, if you still are able to work and contribute, this is how you can do it differently. So there's all of that I think needs to happen. And just ESG, that really, really bringing it onto the table. I think we talk about it loosely, but have we actually formalized it? I'm not sure. And there's interesting work happening. I think in Europe that's more advanced than where we are. But a lot of it also has to follow, the economic activity, and where we're at. And that, for me, I think is some of the things that we can look forward to, and prepare ourselves to be able to shift accordingly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Palesa, thank you so much. Any parting thoughts? What is your advice for HR leaders?
We must spend time looking at what everybody else is doing. I think, immersing yourself and maintaining that balance between being on the balcony and the dance floor is important. The type of jobs we have, can be operationally, I think, intense. People issues happen all the time. But I think you have to carve out time and be intentional about how you're spending it, who are you talking to, who are you spending time with, and how do you come back and either shape or influence some of the decisions, that you're doing. Being open to being challenged, and welcoming opposing views, because that helps sharpen your own thinking. That's critical. And I think being woke, again, to use my son's terminology, to what's happening around us. We can't be blind willfully because, we are married to the certain job that I have to do. It really is being open to, how are people experiencing us as an organization? What do people say? What do I see the people that we're targeting as customers behave? What are their preferences? What are, potential candidates saying? And how do we then take that to make decisions on what we need to change? We can't be reactive. We can't afford to be reactive. We have to be a little bit more proactive, in that sense. And so that, for me, I think is key. The world has changed. It really has, and it continues to. And if we're not improving our own cadence of responding to the change, we're actually just going to do ourselves and our organizations a disservice.
100%. What can we expect from Palesa? What does the future look like for you?
I'm having the time of my life. I think we've got some interesting challenges that we have to help our businesses work through. There's a lot that's expected of us as well from society, employees, and I'm still determined to be your favorite chief dealer of hope. Still definitely want to use my position to exert real transformation that's felt and lived. And so, the insurance industry is quite fascinating. We're trying to solve for skills that aren't there, so it's, experimenting, with, what do we do differently to just be able to, improve our ability, to respond and to make sure that our business writes, the right, kind of risk to be able to respond to things like climate change. For us, it's our lived reality. It's not something that's conceptual. And so there's a lot more from that perspective that, I look forward to contributing, into at an industry level.
Okay.
Personally, my goals are still set, I think taking care of yourself is also key, and managing your own energy. Our jobs are not going to get easier. And so, I'm also quite passionate about how do we start equipping employees, leaders alike, to be able to, get better at managing your own energies,
100%,
because the pressure's not going to go away,
Sure.
So that we're more effective, can contain or ask for help proactively if we need to because of the pressures that we're experiencing. So there's a lot more to be done. And so, it's a long way of saying, I think, there's still a lot more that I need to do, and that keeps me excited.
Great.
We haven't solved for it. And I look forward to also learning from industry colleagues, how are they dealing some of these challenges, and what can we learn and what can we borrow,
100%.
and exchange in return. So, yeah.
when we were talking about, your goals having changed, I thought you were gonna say, yeah, running for president.
No. Yeah, Shem, I pray for our president, citizen number one. I keep him in my prayers because it's intense. There's a lot of expectations on you. People are watching you all the time.
Yeah.
I was still emotionally recovering from what's happened in the States. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With Kamala Harris and Trump. I mean, it's just really bizarre.
100%.
But at the same time, thinking we actually need more peaceful transitions of power. If I think about what's happening in Mozambique, so. It's tricky, Botswana is also such a good example.
Yes, it is.
So there's a lot of pressure on people that are serving in the public office, and that is a type of stress that I would not wish for myself, frankly, or anyone else. I think it's a calling. There are people who, were just born, to lead us in that front.
Yes, 100%.
I'm happy to lead, as an employer citizen, to be honest, T.
Yeah, but look, what I was trying, what I was trying to establish there was outside HR. If you were to do a complete 180, right? Where would you land? Would it be a musician? Would it be an actress?
No,
would you be a chef?
No.
What would you be? If not HR.
You know what? I would probably be full-time, in philanthropic, my
yes.
jaw, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? In philanthropy, that's really where I would be.
Okay.
I mean it. I started working, I needed a job, and then, HR kind of, it called to my higher order purpose. But I seriously would be, working for some NGO somewhere, having that direct impact and influence, on communities. That, for me, would be the best work of my life.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now you're making me think about the best work of my life.
Of course.
And I'm going to feel disgruntled.
I was in Malawi last week.
Yes.
And we're doing the sip and paint.
Yes.
And it was at that moment where I felt like, geez, maybe I was born for this.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I did a lovely painting. So,
yeah.
So those are the things which I think about. Say, maybe if I was not, consulting in the HR space and tech and stuff.
Yeah.
I should just paint for a living,
Yeah, look, there's money to be made there. There's money to be made if you're really good at what you're doing. Yeah, I get you. I would struggle to kind of stay in a leisure hobby or creative, type of work or activity. I really want to give back full time, whether it be United Nations has more of a corporate feel, which is great, but I look at the work that the Gift of Givers are doing, that for me is like, wow, I admire. You need to have different resources, you're dependent on donations and support, etc. So it's a different kind of stress, you know what I mean?
I get you.
But you can see your impact directly and immediately. Yeah, because you're solving for challenges that are visible to the naked eye and seen. Whereas with us, some of the challenges we can preempt what they're going to be. It's all about responding timelessly with the right things. But that for me is where I would feel God sent me.
Well, thank you so much. Hopefully, the next time we have you on the podcast, you'll be running your NGO or part of an NGO somewhere out there, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, there you have it. This is the HR 360 podcast. We hope you found value in our discussion with Palesa, Executive Human Capital at Old Mutual Insure. Till next time, thank you.